I stood paralyzed behind the splintered pine fence, my battle-scarred hand strangling a rusted tin box, my purple heart, my bronze star, the last shards of a war that broke me. Then it hit, a verbal grenade. Why is he even still alive? My son's wife spat, her voice a venomous blade slicing through the air, answered by my own son's vicious laugh, a betrayal sharper than any bayonet I faced in Vietnam. They didn't see me. Steps from their smug Colorado Springs barbecue, where the stars and stripes dangled like a cruel taunt above their deck. I gave them my blood in jungles, my savings for their house, my soul to keep them safe. Now I'm a relic they'd burn to ash. The pain tore through me, a wound deeper than death, raw as Hugh City's screams. I didn't crumble. I charged in. I'm Henry Sullivan. I'm 72 years old, and I'll fight until my last breath. I stepped into the backyard, the rusted tin box of metals still clenched in my hands, my boots crunching on the gravel path of Daniel's Colorado Springs home. The air smelled of charred burgers and pine from the nearby Rockies, but the stars and stripes above the deck felt like a slap across my face. 50 feet away, Daniel flipped steaks on the grill, his back to me, while Claire sipped a wine cooler, her eyes scanning the crowd of neighbors and co-workers, none of whom noticed me. I'd driven 10 miles from my place near Fort Carson, carrying the weight of a $50,000 down payment I'd given them for this house, a sacrifice from my Marine pension. Now, I was invisible. "Hey, Dad, didn't expect you," Daniel muttered without looking up, his voice flat as the prairie. Claire forced a smile, thin as a razor. "Grab a soda from the cooler," she said, pointing to a corner by the trash cans. I sat at a splintered picnic table, the tin box untouched, watching Lily dart past with her friends, her glance fleeting, guilty. Once, I'd taught her to salute the flag, my hand steadying her tiny ones. Now, she didn't stop. The chatter around me about promotions, vacations drowned out the ghosts of my past. Jungles, gunfire, brothers I'd lost. I gripped the box tighter, my knuckles white. They'd taken my money, my pride, but not my fight. The Colorado Springs sun beat down on Daniel's backyard, the heat rising off the gravel like a memory of Saigon's swelter. I sat at the edge of the picnic table, the rusted tin box of my purple heart and bronze star still in my lap, its weight anchoring me to a past nobody here seemed to care about. The barbecue buzzed with laughter, clinking beer bottles, and the sizzle of steaks on the grill. But it felt like I was on the outside of a glass wall, watching a life I'd paid for with my own blood. $50,000 from my Marine pension had bought this house 5 acres of land, a wraparound porch, a place for Daniel to call home after he swore he'd make me proud. I'd believed him then, back when his eyes still lit up at my stories of Hugh City, back when he'd begged to hold my service cap. Now, he stood 30 feet away, flipping burgers, his shoulders slouched, not once glancing my way. Claire, in her pressed sundress, chatted with a neighbor about her new SUV, her voice carrying over the crowd. "It's a hassle, keeping up with family obligations," she said, her eyes flicking toward me for a split second, sharp as a sniper's scope. "Some people just linger too long." The neighbor nodded, oblivious, but her words landed like a gut punch. Daniel didn't flinch, didn't correct her, just turned another steak with a shrug. I scanned the yard for Lily, my granddaughter, the one bright spot in this haze of indifference. She was 16 now, all legs and nervous energy, chasing a frisbee with her friends near the oak tree. I caught her eye for a moment, and she froze, her smile faltering, like she'd been caught stealing. She looked away, quick, her ponytail whipping as she ran back to the game. I remembered her at 5, perched on my knee, giggling as I showed her how to fold the flag, her tiny hands fumbling over the stars. "Grandpa, you're a hero," she'd said, her voice full of wonder. Now, she couldn't even hold my gaze. The realization stung worse than Claire's words. My own blood was ashamed of me, or maybe just too scared to cross her mother's line. I shifted in the creaky chair, my back aching from years of carrying packs and promises. The tin box felt heavier, not just with metals but with the weight of everything I'd given up. I'd sold my old Chevy to help with their mortgage when Daniel lost his job in 2008. I'd spent nights rocking Lily to sleep when Claire worked late, her crib tucked in my spare room near Fort Carson. I'd even hosted their first Memorial Day barbecue here, grilling ribs for 20 people, the air thick with laughter and Johnny Cash on the radio. That was the year Daniel promised to take me fishing at Rampart Reservoir, just the two of us. Like old times. The trip never happened. The invitations stopped coming too, replaced by texts. Busy this weekend, Dad. Maybe next month. I was a fool to think a $50,000 check would buy a seat at their table. Claire's voice cut through again, louder this time, as she leaned toward another guest, a guy in a polo shirt who looked like he sold insurance. He just sits there like he's waiting for a parade, she said, her laugh brittle as broken glass. Doesn't he have anywhere else to be? The guy chuckled, and Daniel, still at the grill, let out a snort, his back still turned. My chest tightened, not with the old pain of shrapnel scars, but with something raw, something that clawed at the edges of my soul. I'd faced death in Vietnam, watched brothers fall, carried their dog tags home. I'd given Daniel this house, this life, and he couldn't even look me in the eye. Claire's words weren't just cruel, they were a declaration. I was no longer needed, no longer wanted, a ghost in their perfect suburban dream. I stood, the tin box under my arm, my boots scuffing the dirt. The crowd didn't notice, but Lily did, her eyes darting to me from across the yard, wide with something like panic. "Grandpa!" she called, soft, hesitant, but Claire's head snapped around, her smile gone. "Lily, come help with the drinks," she barked, and Lily obeyed, her shoulders slumping. I didn't move. The fire from Hughes City was back, not in my chest now, but in my bones, a rage that didn't scream, but burned steady, unyielding. I'd survived ambushes, jungle rot, and nights wondering if I'd see dawn. I'd built this family from my own sacrifices, and they'd turned me into a stranger. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I'd fought harder battles than this, and I'd fight again. Not for them, for me. I drove the 10 miles back to my small house near Fort Carson, the rusted tin box of metals rattling on the passenger seat of my 2092 Ford pickup. The Colorado Springs night closed in, the Rockies a dark silhouette against a sky that felt too heavy, like the air before a monsoon in Vietnam. Inside, the house was quiet, just the hum of an old fridge and the faint tick of a clock I hadn't wound in years. I set the box on the kitchen table, its edges worn from decades of handling, and opened it. My purple heart gleamed under the fluorescent light, its purple ribbon faded but unbroken. Next to it, the bronze star, earned for dragging a wounded buddy through a hail of gunfire in Hughes City. Beneath them, a creased photo of my squad, half of them gone before I turned 25. Their faces stared back, frozen in time, men I'd failed to save. I'd carried their dog tags home, their weight heavier than any metal. My hands shook as I pulled out a letter, yellowed and soft, from Ellen, my wife, gone 8 years now. "Keep our family whole, Hank," she'd written before her last surgery, her handwriting steady despite the pain. "You're their anchor." I'd promised her that, sitting by her hospital bed, her hand cold in mine. I'd failed her, too. I'd given Daniel everything $50,000 for his house, nights teaching him to fish at Rampart Reservoir, my silence when he stopped calling. I'd thought it was enough to keep us tethered. But tonight, Claire's words, "Why is he even still alive?" and Daniel's laugh echoed in my skull, a wound deeper than any shrapnel. I wasn't their anchor. I was their burden. I sank into a chair, the wood creaking under me, and powered up my old laptop, its fan whining like a distant chopper. An email from Daniel, sent months ago to Claire, popped up in my inbox, forgotten until now. "Dad's too stubborn to move on," it read. "Let's sell the house. He won't notice the paperwork. He's got no fight left." My breath caught, sharp as a bayonet twist. They'd planned to strip me bare, to erase me from the home I'd built for them, the one I'd poured my Marine pension into. $50,000, every cent I'd saved from years of overtime at the VA hospital, gone without a word of gratitude. I'd taught Daniel to shoot straight, to stand tall, but he'd aimed his betrayal right at my heart. The radio sat dusty on the counter, a gift from Ellen for our 20th anniversary. I turned it on, and Sweet Caroline filled the room, her favorite song, the one we danced to in this very kitchen, her laughter brighter than the Colorado sun. I closed my eyes, and for a moment she was there, her hand on my shoulder, telling me I was enough. But the song ended, and the silence rushed back, colder than a winter night in the Rockies. I saw Lily's face in my mind, her guilty glance at the barbecue, her voice calling, "Grandpa," before Claire silenced her. I'd bought her first bike, taught her to salute the flag, but now she was caught in their web, too young to break free. I'd failed her too, just like Ellen, just like my squad. My chest ached, not from age but from a grief so raw it felt like drowning. I'd survived ambushes, carried men through fire, but this betrayal was a battle I hadn't trained for. I opened a drawer, pulling out a small journal where I'd written letters to Ellen after she passed. "I'm trying, Ellen," I'd scrawled last year, "but they don't need me anymore." Tonight, those words burned. I wasn't just unneeded, I was unwanted, a ghost haunting their perfect suburban life. I slammed the journal shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot. My hands clenched, nails digging into my palms, drawing blood. The pain was real, grounding, a reminder I was still here. Claire's sneer, Daniel's laugh, Lily's silence, they'd tried to bury me alive, but I'd crawled out of worse. In Hugh City, I'd carried a dying man 2 miles through mud and blood. I wasn't done carrying my own weight. Not yet. The morning after the barbecue, I woke before dawn in my Fort Carson house, the taste of betrayal still bitter on my tongue. The rusted tin box of medals sat on the kitchen table, a silent witness to the night's wounds. But I wasn't the broken man Claire and Daniel thought I was. I'd survived Hugh City, carried brothers through hell, and I'd be damned if I let my own blood bury me. I pulled on my old Marine jacket, its leather worn but unyielding, and drove 5 miles to the Colorado Springs Veterans Center. Grace Mitchell, a sharp-eyed lawyer and old friend from the VFW hall, was waiting in her office, her desk stacked with files and a mug that read, "Semper Fi." I dropped the tin box in front of her. "I need to know where I stand," I said, my voice steady as a rifle sight. "They're trying to sell the house I paid for. My name's still on the deed, isn't it?" Grace's eyes narrowed as she opened the box, her fingers brushing the Purple Heart. "You gave Daniel $50,000 for that house," she said, pulling a folder from her drawer. "Let's see what they've done with it." She spread out the paperwork, deeds, loan agreements, my signature scrawled in black ink from a decade ago. "Your name's still there, Hank," she said, tapping the page. "Co-owner, not just a donor. They can't sell without your say." My chest loosened, not with relief, but with purpose. I'd been a fool to trust Daniel's promises, but I wasn't out of the fight. "What can I do?" I asked. Grace leaned forward, her voice low. "You can lock this down, revoke their access, protect your stake, and decide who gets what when you're gone." I nodded. "Let's start now." By noon, I was back home, the Ford's engine still ticking as I dialed a locksmith. A young guy named Pete showed up, his tools clanking in a canvas bag. "New locks, front and back," I told him. "No spare keys for anyone but me." He didn't ask questions, just got to work, the screech of his drill echoing like a call to arms. I watched him swap out the deadbolts, each turn of the wrench a step toward reclaiming my ground. Next, I called the bank, my voice hard as granite. "Remove Daniel Sullivan as an authorized user on my accounts," I said to the clerk, a woman with a clipped Colorado accent. "Reissue the cards in my name only. New PIN, new security questions." She hesitated. "That's your son, sir?" "Was," I corrected. "Do it." The line went quiet, then she confirmed. "It's done. You'll need to sign in person." I hung up, my pulse steady. The fire from Hughes City now a controlled burn. I drove to Tom Baxter's place, a modest ranch house 3 miles away, where the stars and stripes flew proud on a flagpole he'd built himself. Tom, my old squad mate from Vietnam, was polishing his boots on the porch, his hands as steady as they were in 2068. I told him everything: Claire's venom, Daniel's laugh, the email about selling the house. He didn't interrupt, just listened, his eyes fixed on me like we were back in the jungle, planning a patrol. "You fought for this country, Hank," he said finally, his voice rough as gravel. "You carried me when I took a bullet in the leg. Don't let them take you down now. Fight for yourself." I gripped his shoulder, the tin box under my other arm. "I'm not folding, Tom. Not this time." Back home, I opened my safe, pulling out the title to my truck and a folder marked "Will." I spread the papers across the table, my hands no longer shaking. Grace had given me a checklist. Update the will. Name a new executor. Redirect my assets. I scrawled a note to call her tomorrow about a trust for the Colorado Springs Veterans Fund, not Daniel's family. They'd gotten enough. The house, the one I'd poured $50,000 into, wasn't theirs to sell, not without my fight. I'd given them my savings, my time, my pride, but I wasn't giving them my name, not anymore. The clock struck 6, the sun dipping behind the Rockies, painting the sky red like a battlefield sunset. I stood taller, my Marine jacket still on, ready for the war ahead. The sun was dipping below the Rockies, casting long shadows across my Fort Carson porch, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Claire's silver SUV pulled into my driveway, its headlights glaring like searchlights through the dusk. I stood in the doorway, my Marine jacket still on, the new deadbolt gleaming behind me. Claire stepped out, her heels clicking sharp on the pavement, Daniel trailing behind, his hands stuffed in his pockets. They hadn't called, hadn't texted, just showed up like they owned the place, my place, the one I'd kept standing through 40 years of storms and sacrifice. The rusted tin box of medals sat on the hall table, a silent reminder of the battles I'd fought, from Hughes City to this moment. Claire's eyes flicked to it, then to me, cold as a Colorado winter. "Hank, we need to talk," she said, her voice clipped, like she was briefing a subordinate. "You're making things difficult." I didn't move. "Difficult?" I repeated, my tone low, steady, like the calm before a firefight. "You mean by not rolling over while you sell the house I paid for?" Claire's lips tightened, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. Daniel shifted, his boots scuffing the dirt. "Dad, it's not like that," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "We just need to move forward. The market's hot." I stepped onto the porch, the boards creaking under my weight, and faced them square. "Move forward?" I said, my voice rising, a controlled burn breaking free. "With my $50,000? With the house I gave you? After you laughed when she said I shouldn't be alive?" Claire's face hardened, but she didn't flinch. You were eavesdropping, she snapped. That was a private conversation. Private? I shot back, my fists clenching, the scars on my knuckles white under the porch light. You stood in my son's backyard, under the flag I bled for, and called me a burden. You don't get to hide behind private when you're spitting on my life. Daniel's head jerked up, his eyes finally meeting mine, but there was no apology, just a flicker of guilt drowned by defiance. Dad, you're blowing this out of proportion, he said, his voice thin like he was reading a script. Claire was stressed. We didn't mean it. I took a step closer, my boots heavy on the wood. You didn't mean it? I said, each word a bullet. You didn't mean to take my money, my pride, my place in this family? You didn't mean to laugh when she wished me dead? I carried men through gunfire, Daniel. I don't need your lies. Claire crossed her arms, her nails glinting red in the fading light. This is pathetic, Hank, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. You're clinging to a house you don't even live in. Sign the papers. Let us move on. She reached into her purse, pulling out a manila envelope, thrusting it toward me like a challenge. I didn't take it. That house is mine, I said, my voice steel, forged in battles she'd never understand. I paid $50,000 from my Marine pension, every cent earned with sweat and blood. You don't get to erase me from it, Claire scoffed, tossing her hair. You're not some war hero anymore, Hank. You're just old. The word landed like a grenade, but I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse in foxholes. Old? I said, stepping closer, my shadow falling over her. I'm the man who built your life. I fought for this country, for you, for him, and I'll fight now to keep what's mine. Daniel opened his mouth, but I cut him off. Get off my porch, I said, my voice low, final, like a rifle's safety clicking off. You don't own this ground. Not anymore. Claire's eyes widened, but she turned, heels stabbing the gravel as she stormed back to the SUV. Daniel hesitated, his mouth working, but no words came. He followed her, head down, like a soldier retreating. I shut the door, the new lock clicking sharp, a sound as final as a gavel. Inside, I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with the fire of a man who'd just reclaimed his name. The Colorado Springs courthouse loomed like a fortress under the morning sun, its stone steps worn smooth by decades of justice and disputes. I walked in, my Marine jacket squared on my shoulders, the rusted tin box of medals tucked under my arm like a shield. Grace Mitchell strode beside me, her briefcase swinging, her eyes sharp as a hawk's breeze. We'd spent days preparing, combing through deeds, bank statements, and that damning email from Daniel to Claire about selling the house I'd funded with $50,000 from my Marine pension. My name was still on the deed, a fact they thought I'd never notice. But I'd noticed, and I was done being their ghost. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and old coffee, the air heavy with anticipation. The judge, a wiry man with glasses perched low, called the case. Claire and Daniel sat across the aisle, her face a mask of icy control, his eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding mine. Grace stood, her voice clear as a bugle call. Your Honor, Henry Sullivan is co-owner of the property at 1420 Aspen Drive. He contributed $50,000 to the down payment, a sum never repaid, and his signature remains on the deed. She slid a folder across the table, the paperwork crisp, undeniable. The defendants seek to sell without his consent, violating his legal rights. Claire's lawyer, a slick guy in a pinstripe suit, argued they'd acted in good faith, claiming I'd gifted the money with no strings. I gripped the tin box, my knuckles white, the memory of Claire's words, "Why is he even still alive?" burning in my chest. Then Grace played her ace. "We have evidence of intent to deceive," she said, producing a USB drive. A recording from the defendant's daughter, Lily Sullivan, captured a conversation about selling the property without Mr. Sullivan's knowledge. The judge raised an eyebrow as Grace plugged in the drive. Lily's voice, shaky but clear, filled the room. "Mom, you said Grandpa doesn't need to know about the sale," she said, her words trembling. Claire's voice snapped back. "He's too old to care, Lily. Stay out of it." The courtroom went silent, the weight of her betrayal heavier than a mortar round. Daniel's head sank lower, his hands twisting in his lap. Claire's mask cracked, her lips parting, but no words came. The judge leaned forward. "This is troubling," he said, his voice gravelly. "Mr. Sullivan, do you wish to retain ownership or seek other recourse?" I stood, my back straight as it was in 2068. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady, "I want the house protected. Not for me, but for those who deserve it, veterans who fought like I did. I request a trust to transfer my share to the Colorado Springs Veterans Fund." Claire's eyes widened, her breath catching. "You can't do that," she hissed, loud enough for the bailiff to glance over. The judge banged his gavel, sharp as a rifle shot. "Order," he said. "Mr. Sullivan's rights are clear. The deed remains in his name, and he may establish a trust as he sees fit." Grace handed over the trust documents, prepared that morning, naming the Veterans Fund as beneficiary. The judge reviewed them, his pen scratching across the page. "Approved," he said, the word landing like a victory flag planted on a hill. Daniel looked up, his face pale, but he didn't speak. Claire's hands clenched her purse, her nails digging into the leather. I didn't look at them. I'd won, not with vengeance, but with the truth I'd fought for in jungles and now in this courtroom. Outside, the Colorado air was crisp, the Rockies standing tall in the distance. Lily waited by the courthouse steps, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes red but defiant. "Grandpa," she said, her voice soft, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I recorded it because I couldn't let them do that to you." I set the tin box down, my hand on her shoulder. "You did right, Lily," I said. "You're braver than they'll ever know." She hugged me, quick and fierce, like she was 5 again, saluting the flag in my yard. "Can I still see you?" she asked. "Always," I answered, my voice thick. Grace joined us, her smile quiet but proud. "You took back your ground, Hank," she said. I nodded, the weight of the tin box lighter now. I'd fought for my name, my pride, and I'd won not just for me, but for every veteran who'd ever been forgotten. The Colorado Springs dawn broke soft over my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom just 2 miles from Fort Carson, its windows catching the first light off the Rockies. I'd left my old house behind, the one where I'd raised Daniel, where Ellen's laughter once echoed, where I'd kept the ghosts of Vietnam at bay. The movers had come and gone, leaving only what mattered. A few boxes, my Marine jacket, and the rusted tin box of metal's Purple Heart, Bronze Star, now resting on a shelf by the door. I hung a faded photo of Ellen next to it, her smile bright as the day we danced to Sweet Caroline in our old kitchen. The apartment smelled of fresh paint and pine, a clean slate after the courthouse victory that secured my name on the deed and sent $50,000 worth of my share to the Colorado Springs Veterans Fund. I wasn't running from the past. I was building a future on my terms. I brewed coffee in a dented pot, the same one Ellen bought me in 2075, and sat by the window, the Rockies standing like sentinels in the distance. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was spacious, like the open plains after a storm. I joined the local VFW hall, a squat brick building 3 miles away, where old soldiers like me swapped stories over cheap beer and grilled burgers on Memorial Day. Tom Baxter was there most evenings, his laugh rough but warm, pulling me into conversations about fishing at Rampart Reservoir or the time we outran a mortar barrage in 2068. "You're looking lighter, Hank," he said one night, clapping my shoulder, "like you've shed a war's worth of weight." I nodded, sipping my coffee, the tin box catching the light. He was right. I wasn't carrying Daniel's betrayal anymore, or Claire's venom. I was carrying myself. Lily showed up on a Saturday, her bike wobbling as she parked it against my balcony railing. She carried a rolled-up poster, her backpack slung low, her eyes brighter than they'd been at the barbecue. "Grandpa, I made you something," she said, unrolling a pencil sketch of me in my Marine uniform, standing under the stars and stripes, my hand raised in a salute. The lines were rough, but the pride in her work was sharp as a blade. "It's you," she said, her voice soft. "The way I see you." I took the drawing, my throat tight. "You see clearer than most, Lily," I said, pinning it above my coffee table next to Ellen's photo. We sat on the balcony, splitting a plate of oatmeal cookies I'd baked her favorite, the recipe Ellen taught me. "I'm sorry about Mom," she said, crumbs on her chin. "She's still mad about the house. Dad doesn't talk about it." I leaned back, the chair creaking. "They made their choices," I said. "I made mine." I breathed. Lily stayed an hour, telling me about her history class, how she'd written a paper about Vietnam, inspired by my stories. "I told them about Hughes City," she said, her eyes wide. "How you carried your friend 2 miles. They didn't believe me." I smiled, the first real smile in months. "They don't have to," I said. "You do." When she left, she hugged me, her arms stronger than I remembered, like she was holding on to more than just me. I watched her bike down the street, the Rockies glowing pink in the sunset, and felt something settle in my chest, a peace I hadn't known since Ellen's last dance. I started volunteering at the Veterans Fund, driving 4 miles twice a week to help with their food pantry. The work was simple, stacking cans, sorting donations, but it felt like a mission. I'd load boxes with younger vets, some scarred like me, others quiet with their own ghosts. One afternoon, a guy named Mike, barely 30, thanked me for the trust fund donation. "That house money's keeping our shelter open," he said, his voice rough. "You're saving lives, man." I nodded, my hand steady on a crate of canned peaches. "Just doing what I can," I said. But inside, I felt taller, like the man who'd once carried a squad through hell. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living on my terms, for my people, for the battles that still mattered. The Colorado Springs dusk settled over my apartment, the Rockies fading into a quiet purple haze. I sat on the balcony, a chipped mug of coffee cooling in my hands, the city's lights twinkling like distant stars below. The rusted tin box of metal's Purple Heart, bronze star rested inside, no longer a burden but a testament, next to Ellen's photo and Lily's sketch of me saluting the flag. 3 months had passed since the courthouse, since I'd taken back my name and given my $50,000 share of the house to the Colorado Springs Veterans Fund. Daniel and Claire hadn't called, their silence louder than their betrayal ever was. I didn't need their voices anymore. I'd found my own, forged in the jungles of Hughes City, tempered by loss and sharpened by the fight to stand tall again. I thought about Lily, her bike now a fixture on my balcony, her visits a steady rhythm in my weeks. She'd come yesterday, bringing a new sketch, a simple flagpole under the Rockies, the stars and stripes snapping in the wind. "It's for you, Grandpa," she'd said, her voice soft but sure, "for keeping your promise." I'd kept it not to Daniel or Claire, but to Ellen, to myself, to the men I'd carried through gunfire. I wasn't just a veteran, a father, a grandfather. I was Henry Sullivan, a man who'd learned that family isn't blood, it's the ones who see you, who stand beside you when the world turns its back. Tom Baxter's words echoed, "Fight for yourself." I had, and I'd won. Life doesn't hand you a seat at the table. Sometimes you have to build your own, even if it's just a folding chair under a Colorado sky. I'd spent years waiting for Daniel to remember the boy who fished with me at Rampart Reservoir, for Claire to see past her disdain, but waiting only carved me hollow. So I stopped. I built my table here, in this apartment, at the VFW hall with Tom, in the pantry at the Veterans Fund where I stacked cans for men like me. The lesson wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. You don't need permission to exist, to matter, to live. You claim it, one step, one lock, one truth at a time. I sipped my coffee, the Rockies steady in the distance. This fight wasn't over, but it was mine now. To every veteran, every soul who's felt forgotten, your name is enough. Build your table. Hold your ground. I'm Henry Sullivan, 72 years old, and I'm still here saluting my own flag. If this story hit you, if it stirred something in your chest, hit that like button. Drop a comment, tell me about your fight, your table. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, subscribe and ring the bell. Not for me, but for the battles we all face, the ones worth fighting for.